Good morning. It's now 11:30 and time for me to resume these hearing sessions into the Corby Part 2 local plan. Firstly, can we just check everybody who's on this particular session that we have suitable sound and video? I believe today from the council we have Mrs. Turner.
Yes, present, Ma'am.
Right, thank you very much. We also have Mr. Begley.
Yes, Ma'am, thank you.
Right, good morning. We also have Mr. Jameson, the council solicitor.
Thank you, Ma'am.
Good morning again. And we have Mr. Lucas from Lucas Land and Planning.
Thank you, Ma'am.
Lovely, thank you very much. As all the participants from this particular session have been with us previously, I don't intend to go through my opening remarks, what I have said previously in terms of our operating modus of operandi, shall we say, and that will continue this session. So I don't intend to go through that. But for today, our next session, Matter 4, looks at site selection methodology and the individual site allocations. Now, to start off with, what I'd like to do is just spend a few minutes looking at the actual methodology, the process for selecting sites to be allocated in the Part 2 plan. There is a paper which is reference, excuse me, EB HOUT2A, which is a site selection methodology background paper from June 19. That sets out the approach. But can I, as a starter for our discussion today, can I ask the council just to take us through the process that they have undertaken?
Yes, thank you, Ma'am. Yes, you've mentioned the site selection methodology background paper. This supports and builds on work that was undertaken in selecting the strategic sites as part of the joint core strategy. And the methodology that we've used is consistent with the NPPF, National Planning Policy Framework, and the Planning Practice Guidance. The process has involved identifying sites from a range of sources, including sites already identified within the Strategic Housing Land Availability Assessment and the Brownfield Register, and the remaining sites within the old 1997 Corby Local Plan. The council has consulted on the methodology alongside consultation on earlier versions of the plan, and we've taken these comments into account in the preparation of further iterations of the background paper and the assessment work. 2 separate call for sites exercises have also been carried out alongside the consultation on the scoping document and the emerging draft options consultation versions of the plan. In total, the council has identified and assessed 138 potential sites for housing across the borough for their suitability, availability and achievability against a number of sustainability criteria which are outlined in the appendices, with the best scoring sites being taken forward in a short list of stage assessment work, which has been undertaken with technical officers and specialist advisors with input from the North Northamptonshire Joint Planning and Delivery Unit design officers as part of design surgery meetings, which has helped us to identify potential constraints and opportunities for those sites, which has then helped us to develop the site design principles for the allocations. We consider that the process for assessing and selecting the sites is robust and objective and is consistent with the JCS, NPPF and Planning Practice Guidance.
Okay, lovely, thank you very much. Just a couple of points from me, I think, on this. You've mentioned that the methodology was consulted on and then you've taken on board the comments that you then received. What were those comments? In particular, what did you actually change?
Let me briefly consult. We've included those in the appendices, within the document itself. So at Appendix 2, that lists the sites that were promoted during the 2016 consultation alongside the scoping consultation. And then Appendix 3 lists the sites that were promoted as part of the 2018 consultation on the emerging draft options and how we've dealt with those sites. So we've treated the call for sites and the consultation similarly. And then in Appendix 4, where we've received relevant responses during the scoping consultation, we've included these and how we've adjusted the methodology accordingly.
Okay, all right, thank you. In assessing size, did you have a particular site minimum threshold, a certain site size that you assessed?
We did. We set a threshold of 0.25 hectares, which was consistent with the work on the SLAR.
Right, okay. And what sort of dwelling size would that equate to?
I think we said 10.
10.
Yeah,
Right,
or
okay.
capable of accommodating 10 dwellings or more.
Right, so was there a maximum within that as well?
We did, yes, sorry, apologies. We
Right.
set a threshold of less than 500 dwellings, because anything above 500 dwellings we considered would have been as part of the joint core strategy, strategic site assessment work.
Right, okay. So you didn't consider there was any of those larger sites that were appropriate to be taken forward, possibly sites that weren't selected through this joint core strategy process, but maybe circumstances had changed any of those sites that might have been prudent to bring forward?
We didn't. I think we only had one additional large site that was promoted as part of the call for sites, both call for sites. And again, we said that this was something that we would have to consider as part of a review of the core strategy.
Right, okay. All right, thank you. I think that's all my questions in terms of the actual methodology. The evidence that you submitted on that is quite thorough. So I'm quite content with that. What I want to do now is to actually look at the individual allocations themselves. And not surprisingly, I want to go through each of them in turn. I think there's 7 of them in total that we need to go through today. So just to really start our discussions on those, looking at whether those sites are available, sustainable, viable and deliverable within the plan period, and also looking at those design principles that have been built into the policies that relate to each of those sites. So first of all, if we start with the Builders Yard at Rockingham Road, perhaps I could ask you just to outline in brief summary the position with this particular site.
Okay, this is a vacant Builders Yard within the growth town. We scored it against the criteria within the assessment work, and it scored well, so it progressed to the second stage of assessment. Within our response to the matters, we undertook a deliverability update where we contacted the landowners as part of the assessment work. The landowner informed us in November 2018 that the site is available and the landowner intends to sell the site for housing depending on land values. So we consider that the site is developable within the plan period. We have contacted the landowner again in August 2020, just really for a brief update, and they've confirmed that they're in a similar position as to the position we presented in the background paper.
Okay, thank you. Now this site, it doesn't have planning permission, is that correct?
It doesn't.
So in your view, is it developable in the plan period?
We believe developable as opposed to deliverable, yes.
Yeah, yes, that's the distinction I'm making. So in terms of the trajectory, it's not contributing towards the 5-year housing land supply. You're looking for it to come forward later than that. Just my record, I think it's 24, 25 you're suggesting?
Yes, let me double check. Yes,
So
we've said 24, 25.
Sorry,
yeah.
31 dwellings in total coming forward in 24, 25 and 25, 26. So in terms of the work that needs to be undertaken on this site, as I said, there's no planning permission in place as yet, but you're content that it is developable within the plan period.
The landowner,
sorry,
apologies,
the
landowner confirmed they expect delivery, yes, around that time. So it certainly wouldn't be within the 5 years, but beyond that.
Okay, right. The reason I'm asking the question, I suppose, is that I think it's in the site assessment background paper. There's a reference in there, the landowner information suggests 7 to 10 years that the site may come forward, which didn't quite tally with a trajectory of 24, 25. But if there's more up-to-date information, then that explains it.
Possibly. I think it is a very similar position. There was some uncertainty. I think it was more that the landowner does intend to develop the site. Exactly when was more sketchy, but certainly beyond the 5 years. And I think as far as we were concerned, if it was beyond the 5 years, yeah, just push it back.
Okay. Is the site on the Brownfield Land Register?
I believe it is. I would need to double check.
Right, okay. And is there any particular constraints or contamination issues or anything like that from past uses that might impact on its deliverability?
I think that we had the possibility, because it's a reclaimed builder's yard, there was it was possible ecological constraints. But other than that, I think really just taking into account access into the site, but nothing that's insurmountable.
Right, okay. Right, okay. I think that's probably all I need to ask on that particular site. Just as a general comment, what I am going to do is come back to Corby possibly next week and undertake some site visits, and I will be looking at all of these allocations in more detail when I do that, just to inform you of what I'm doing in the next few weeks. So in terms of the builder's yard, I think that's all I need to ask on that particular site. So we'll move on then to Maple House, Canada Square.
Yes, Maple House, Canada Square is a county council owned site, Northamptonshire County Council. It's a vacant site of a former care home which has since been demolished. So we
Right.
acknowledge the site is available now. We did contact adult social care services within Northamptonshire County Council as part of the background paper. And in November 2018, they indicated that they're considering developing the site as an in-house care home. We did request a further update last month, and they've now advised they don't really have a significant update, just that their plans are as they were, but that it may be reviewed once the new unitary authority comes into place. So they didn't really have an update in that context.
Right, okay, that's interesting. So Maple House, in the trajectory, it's allocated for 14 dwellings coming forward in 24-25. So is that still realistic? Is that still current?
I think it's still, we acknowledge that it's, again, similar to the builder's yard, developable as opposed to deliverable, as we don't have enough detailed information to bring it forward to the 5 years. But again, we projected beyond the 5 year, but within the plan period, just in line with that, with the developable definition.
Right, okay. In terms of this, the in-house care home, do you have any more information on what the council are thinking there?
We don't, unfortunately, no. I think that's what we were hoping to get a brief update more recently, but I imagine it's not as high priority until the unitary authority is formed. So yeah.
Right. Yeah, I appreciate it is only a small site, so if it slipped, the implications of it wouldn't be too significant for the overall deliverability. But is your assessment of 14 dwellings, how does that relate to the in-house care home proposal?
Based on the information we have, we used an average site threshold,
Right,
and
okay.
we'd already included it within the previous version of the plan at that amount. So it was more for consistency and wait to see what comes.
I see. Okay then. So the design principles attached to that particular policy H2, is there anything in there that would cause particular deliverability issues for that site?
Nothing significant. I mean, it takes into account that there's a tree preservation order in very close proximity, part of the site as well. And we did have comments from Anglian Water to say that there's sewers within the boundary of the site. So things that would need to be taken into account in the design of any development, but hopefully wouldn't prevent the site from coming forward.
Right, so the position of the sewers on the site, that doesn't say sever the site or create particular layout issues that could impinge on the site coming forward?
I don't believe so. The comments that we received from Anglian Water were that they would like them to be taken into account when designing the development. More so that there were no dwellings situated above, that they were still accessible. So yeah, I think that was more a design consideration.
Right, okay, and I see it is obviously in an urban area, it's surrounded by residential properties, access to be taken from Alberta Close. And you're happy and content that the site is developable within the plan period?
Yes, it's certainly indications suggest so.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, I think that's probably all I need to ask on that one. Maple House, land at Station Road, we'll move on to that one.
Yes, land at Station Road, it's a previously developed site. It does have planning permission, which was granted agreement. That's the position that we've reported in the background paper, but full planning permission has since been granted for 150 dwellings, and discharge of conditions applications was submitted in January and June of this year. So we're confident that this is going to be deliverable within the 5 years. So
right, okay. Now, I believe this site was a former railway siding, so are there any particular issues that we need to be aware of?
Not that I'm aware, and given that it has planning permission, I think that they've been dealt with through the planning process now.
Right, so there aren't any particular or any contamination issues, for example, that they're not insurmountable. They're certainly with a suitable assessment and mitigation measures that can be resolved, presumably.
Yes, as far as I'm aware, yes.
Right, and are there any other criteria that we need to be aware of in relation to its site's location?
I don't think so. I mean, we did review this criteria from the emerging draft options to take account of the planning permission. So really we're retaining, although it has full planning permission, we've been retaining the sites within the plan until they're commenced, more just in case they don't come forward in their current form, that we've attempted to incorporate some of the principles from the planning application within the design principles just to reflect what's already permission.
Right, okay. I think looking at those, I understand there is criteria in there that relates to noise, certainly from the railway line. Is there a need for further design principles in relation to contamination, or is it best to resolve through the permissions that are currently in place?
We did consult with our environmental health team as part of the background work, which I know was possibly been superseded now with the planning applications. But no, nothing that raised any concern to include further criteria.
Right, okay, thank you. And are there any particular viability issues with this site?
Not that I'm aware of. I can't recall the exact mix that's been given permission, or if there were a viability assessment with that planning application, but the plan-wide viability assessment that takes into account a range of the typologies to be tested within the borough, it acknowledges that where the land values are marginal, viability is challenging, but that we just need to apply policies flexibly, which we take on board.
Right, okay, thank you. Can I just ask a question about its deliverability in terms of trajectory? Station Road,
yeah.
The trajectory currently suggests 75 dwellings in 2021, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Yes, and as you just informed me that the discharge of conditions has taken place in June. They presumably aren't on site as yet. So is that realistic, do you think?
We believe so. I mean, this trajectory is based on, as my colleague Ms. Shave has said this morning, it's based on the November 2019 5-year land supply statement, which this site will have been considered as part of. So, but that's obviously in years 2 and 3 of the 5-year period. We do believe it's certainly deliverable within the 5 years, whether a further review of the land supply position would budget a year perhaps, but it's, yeah, they're not on site now, but as far as we're aware, they've discharged conditions in January and June of this year. Right,
okay. I think the question I need you to have a look at this again is because 75 dwellings in the year 2021, we are halfway through to 2020 now. Is it realistic that it's going to achieve and actually complete 75 dwellings? Will it complete even in this year? It might well be, it needs to be taken over into 21, 22. There is a planning permission in place, conditions have been discharged, but clearly there is a lead-in time for completions. So I think I need to ask you to have just to review that trajectory in terms of deliverability on this particular site in light of that.
Okay, again, I suppose that's something that we would do as part of an annual review of the sites. So although we have had a brief update as of now to inform the allocation, from memory, I believe it's a private rented scheme it's a flatted scheme. So presumably when it does.
Oh, well, yeah, that will affect delivery, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that's fair enough. That will impact on delivery, yes. So I still think it may need a little bit of consideration and further review. Can I ask Mr. Lucas, you've got your hand up there. You want to come in on this particular site?
Yeah, exactly that point, Mark. There's 3 points I wanted to make. 75 units completed by April next year. That's more than challenging in my opinion. And also when this was given a consent, it was approved 3rd of the 6th and 19th. Would you believe it, the note in Planning magazine said work on the new homes is expected to begin this autumn. Well, that's last year. So what are the problems with this particular site in moving forward? That's the first question. And secondly, as I understand it, there's a surface water issue here that hasn't been resolved. Certainly from Northamptonshire County Council, that's the information I've got at the 17th of June. So all the conditions aren't discharged, are they?
Right, can I ask Mrs. Turner, do you want to comment on that, please?
I believe we haven't said that all the conditions have been discharged. We've just said that some conditions have been discharged. Two applications for discharge of conditions have been submitted in January and June of this year. I think we acknowledge the timescales for delivering the site, but from our point of view of allocating the site, we are, I appreciate that the trajectory goes hand in hand with the sites, but from the evidence-based point of view within the background paper, we were merely trying to determine whether the sites are developable or deliverable, granted where that is within the trajectory makes a difference, particularly to our 5-year housing land supply. But based on the information we have available to us now, we believe the site is deliverable within the 5-year period.
Sorry, Mr. Lees. I was going to say, I don't think we necessarily dispute the fact that it's deliverable within the 5-year period. It's a question of when it will deliver within that period, which comes back to the point I was making about the 75 units in 2021. But Mr. Lucas, do you want to comment?
Absolutely, Mum. You've absolutely said it. I mean, it is more than challenging. I understand it's a flatted scheme, but actually, the letter I've got, which is on your website, on the planning application, we would advise that there is insufficient information available to discharge condition 4, to which this application refers, and that's to do with the surface water. So that hasn't been resolved, and that needs to be resolved. And all I'm saying is, I'm not challenging the fact that it's not won't come forward in the 5 years. I'm challenging the fact that in terms of the time frame, the 75 next year, by the end of this year, in terms of housing land, and the next year. So there might be an issue there. Thank you, Mark.
Right. No, that's no problem. Thank you, Mr. Lucas. Yes, I mean, in terms of surface water in the design principles, G, this particular slide, it does ask for full details of surface water drainage scheme to be agreed before development commences, which clearly relates to the condition that's been imposed. From what you're telling me, Mr. Lucas, that has yet to be resolved. It does clearly indicate that there are a number of technical issues to resolve before this site can start delivering. So again, I think it just reinforces the need for the council just to review when this site may well deliver in terms of the trajectory.
Can I very briefly come back to Mr.
Certainly.
Lucas's point? I don't disagree that it could be later within the 5-year period, but I think that's also, we need to bear in mind that the information that trajectory is based on is the November 29 5-year supply position statement, which will have been based on a March 2019 base date. So where this site fits within the 5 years will of course be reviewed as part of the next 5-year supply update. So obviously we're always dealing with is a lag with what we're dealing with the information that we've presented. So where I've provided a brief update for the purpose of the matters statement, that obviously that's more up to date than the position that we've actually published. So that will be picked up in due course.
Exactly.
I do appreciate that, because clearly these things are moving all the time, and you can only produce your trajectory at a certain point in time based on the evidence and information you've got. And unfortunately, things do move on, and more information, more evidence becomes pertinent and available, which then indicates there may be some issues with a particular site, which is why I think we just need to have a period of time to review some of these. But sure. Mr. Lucas, go on.
At the risk of being a bore, Ma'am, this is why up-to-date monitoring, and dare I say, I'm not selling the quarterly update, but actually up-to-date monitoring really does help. And I'm not trying to be awkward or anything like that. I'm just merely pointing out things because, you know, if it's said that it's going to happen at a certain time, and clearly there is an issue, we need to address that. I'm sorry to be a bore.
No, I'm not being a bore. I understand the point you're making, but clearly there is a resource issue for the council in trying to monitor on a quarterly basis. And I do appreciate some authorities do it. But it's
around Corby, Mum.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Lucas. Right, in that case, I think that's all we need to say about Station Road at this stage. So we'll move on then to land off Elizabeth Street.
Yes, thank you, Ma'am. Land off Elizabeth Street. This site includes a number of vacant buildings, including the former Magistrates Court and the police station. Homes England are partial land Magistrates Court portion of the site, with discussions held between Homes England and the council in November 2018 to consider bringing the site forward as a comprehensive development. Homes England indicated within the evidence to inform the background paper that they intend to prepare a development brief for the site to be delivered within the lifetime of the plan. Homes England have provided us with an update in August to explain that the sale of the Magistrates Court part of the site is currently under conditional offer, subject to the buyer also acquiring the police station part of the site. Homes England have accepted the conditional offer, which is being progressed with their legal team now.
Right, okay, so this is an interesting site in that clearly there are some existing buildings, other ownership, other uses on the site at the moment, which will need resolving before the site can come forward. I do appreciate that in terms of the trajectory, you're looking at 24-25 for 100 dwellings, so there is a little bit of time to go on this one. It is not contributing to the 5-year land supply, so we are looking at whether it's developable within the planned period effectively. Can you tell me a little bit more about the particular existing uses on the site, and are you confident that they can be either removed, shall we say, or that the site can become vacant and available during the planned period?
Yes, as far as we're aware, both the police station and the Magistrates Court are currently vacant, so there should be no problem. And Homes England have indicated that they're willing to progress the site, so we do consider it to be developable within the plan period.
Right, okay, all right, thank you. Are there any viability issues in relation to this site?
Not that I recall. I believe it was one of the tested typologies within the plan-wide viability assessment, and again I think they tested multiple densities, higher and a medium density, for a number of the sites, particularly the town centre sites, which this is obviously just outside the boundary of the town centre. But no, again, it came back to depending on the land value within the borough. It would perhaps challenging, but not we're happy to flexibly apply other policies.
Right, okay. I think the reason I'm asking that is because in the wording of certain sites, page 6 is another one where you make reference to viability, and other sites that the policies don't refer to viability. So it suggests that there could potentially be an issue with certain sites, and maybe some further work needs to be undertaken.
Oh, I see. I see. Yeah, I see your point.
You see what I'm making, yeah.
Yes. It could, simply put, it could be because we treated it very similar to the town centre sites, which obviously are under the town centre redevelopment opportunity sites. And I think because we were encouraging an uplift in the density, there's obviously more flexibility. Subject to viability would allow flexibility to deliver on that site what is more viable.
Right, okay, so the viability is not in terms of the whole site coming forward, it's more to do with the number of dwellings, really, is it? Is that the case?
I think both, but yeah, it's particularly important given that we're encouraging higher density on certain sites.
Right, okay, all right, thank you. Can we have a look at the design principles of this site? Now, I do appreciate you made reference to a development brief that's been prepared by Homes England, but which is good, and that's coming forward. But do the design principles need to be a little bit more descriptive in terms of what is being expected on that site? For example, should it make reference to maybe a 5-storey development, parking standards, flexibility, crime prevention? Are there other things that potentially could be design principles?
We did have, we discussed these at some length as part of the design surgery meetings, and this was one of the sites, along with the town centre sites, that we were encouraged that high density would be acceptable. But again, I think it's trying to give that flexibility to deliver what's suitable for the market at that time. And whilst we were encouraging higher density because it's on the edge of the town centre, I suppose it will eventually be for the developer to determine what comes forward on the site. Again, these these principles were meant to act as a guide for our vision. But again, it's how these will be applied will be a matter for how their interpretation.
Right. Okay. I think the point to make is that point A of this policy looks at development brief will be encouraged, which I suppose will actually look at some of those issues anyway in terms of the density and the layout and how the site could potentially come forward. The process with that development brief, is it something that you intend should come forward with the application, or is it something that will be consulted on? What are you expecting?
I believe that Homes England are intending to prepare the development brief to then take to the market. So that's our understanding.
Right, okay, so it's not something that's going to be consulted on with the local community for their input in terms of how the site may come forward. It's more for the marketing of the site and securing a developer partner.
I believe so, yes.
Right, okay. Are there any particular constraints on this site that might impact on its deliverability?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, obviously there's multiple uses, but but they are trying to work alongside each other to bring it forward as a
right.
Prefer to see for the site.
Okay, I noticed that there is an issue again with sewer, Anglian Water's comments, and presumably that is something that just can be resolved through the appropriate layout on the site.
I believe so. I mean, I think all Anglian Water were trying to do was make us aware of which sites were affected so that could be taken into consideration as early as possible. Right,
okay, thank you. Okay, then I think that's probably all I need to ask on Elizabeth Street. Interesting site with existing uses. So if we move on then to policy H6, Pluto, Gainsborough Road.
Yes, thank you. This is,
I believe, yes.
A public house. The site is bare land now following demolition of that. There have been a number of pre-application discussions for this site in the past, and a planning application is expected to be submitted in the short term, and that's our position within the evidence. We have not yet received a planning application for this site, but we as far pre-application discussions that were had previously were positive, and we consider that it's still developable within the lifetime of the plan.
Okay, and those pre-application discussions, do you have any more information on those in terms of the anticipated time frame for the site coming forward, the landowner's intentions?
No, I don't. And we did contact the developer for this site, and we haven't had an update, unfortunately, which we would have liked to have had for this. But we've identified it and assessed it, and it's come out, scored highly. We've considered it as part of the design surgeries. So we still consider it to be developable, and we have had developer interest. So yes, within the lifetime of the plan.
Okay, I note the trajectory suggesting 15 units in 24-25, so it's within the longer plan period rather than the 5-year supply, and it is only a small site of 30 potential dwellings coming forward. It's an unusual shape. Can you tell me a little bit about the background to it?
It is, I mean, I've only ever visited the site when it's had the hoarding up and you can't really see very much, but I believe that the public house was at one half of the site and the rest was just land. So yes, it is an unusual shaped site, which we've tried to reflect within the design principles. I know it's a bit of a challenge, but yes, we've tried to overcome that as best we can.
Right, yes, I understand that. Yeah, it's one I want to go and have a look at actually and just see for myself on how it. So what are the surrounding land uses? Is that open space to the south of it?
Yes, it is. Yeah, that's a green area to the south, and then it's residential.
Right. Okay. All right then. Looking at the design principles for this particular site, I think most of them are perfectly acceptable, and they are understandable for a site of this nature, bearing in mind its context. Can I ask you about H?
Yes, we did have comments back from the County Council to say that given that there was the demolished building rubble on the site, that there could be reptiles within the rubble. So she recommended that consideration was given to that.
Is that still the case? Is it still rubble on the site? Has it been cleared, or don't you know?
I'm not sure.
Right. Okay. No, so I don't apologise. That's fine. It's just as my way of update. It was just the way it was worded. It just made me. I had to read it a couple of times. Given to reptiles due to past demolitions, and I understand what you're trying to say. Yeah, no, that's fine. I don't think I have any comment on that. But it will be one I would like to go and have a look at because of the interesting boundary to it. So how would you envisage that could be taken account of, particularly in relation to the open space? I know A looks at the irregular shape, incorporating frontages on all site boundaries to provide natural surveillance, but it's how could it come forward in terms of its boundaries with the open space rather than the road frontages?
I believe the suggestion, in criteria C, we've recommended sensitive design of up to 3 stories in places, which was something that the design surgery design officers thought could be acceptable, that if there were higher stories facing onto the open space for natural surveillance, that might be a way around it. But they did acknowledge that it's an interesting site from a design point of view.
Yes, it will be. Yes. No, that's okay. That's fine. No, thank you for that. Can we move on then to Cheltenham Road?
Yes. Cheltenham Road, it's a vacant parcel of land within a wider urban development, but that does have planning permission for a council-led affordable housing scheme. Full planning permission was granted for that in April 2019. We've since had an update from our housing development and regeneration team, and they've advised that development is expected to commence during 2020 and complete by January 2022. So we're confident that that's deliverable within the 5 years.
Right, okay, so in terms of the trajectory, let's have a quick look at that. You're suggesting 18 in 2021. Is that correct?
Yes, that is.
It hasn't started on site as yet, as far as you're aware.
I'm not sure. No, I don't believe so.
Right, okay. Yeah, so again, that 18 units in 2021, which is the current monitoring year, that may be a challenge. So it might be one I think you might need to just review. I agree that it is looking like it will be deliverable, I should say, within the 5-year supply period, but it may be that it needs to creep over into the next year, depending on your current assessments and your information that you've gained from discussions with colleagues. As I said, it's a council-led scheme, isn't it? Yeah. So I think from a deliverability point of view, I think it's looking promising, but it's just in terms of the actual delivery years, in terms of completions, that it might need looking at again.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, right, thank you for that. Can I, in terms of this policy 7, there's a reference in there to a planning permission. Now, it is quite unusual to have a planning permission reference in a particular policy. And I am a little bit concerned in terms of effectiveness here and soundness of that policy in that regard, because you never know what may happen. It may well be circumstances change, that permission may not be implemented, or it might be revised. So it goes really to the effectiveness and soundness of that policy. What's your view on that? Why did you include the reference to the planning application within the policy itself?
I'm not really sure, but I think because we adjusted the design principles to reflect some of the information within that planning application, I mean, we can take the reference out if that makes the policy more sound.
Yeah, I think it gives the policy a bit more flexibility, because otherwise it's too restrictive. If circumstances change, which we don't know if they do, then I think it would be to your advantage to have a more flexible approach on this site, so that you aren't restricting it in the way that it's currently drafted. Okay. So I think that's one for you to have a look at. Right, excellent. Right, okay. And in terms of the design principles for that particular site, I presume they reflect to a degree what's already in the planning permission.
They do to some extent, yes. I think we're built on the previous version of the principles that we had.
Right, okay. I noticed there are issues of noise attenuation and surface water sewers again in there. Presumably there are no viability issues with that particular site. It's quite a long, thin site.
No, not that I'm aware of. And again, the plan-wide viability assessment covered that really for all the sites.
Okay, all right, thank you. Right. I think that's probably all I need to ask on Cheltenham Road. In terms of other sites in the trajectory, now these probably are, they're not allocations, they're commitments, but just really for my information, just so that I'm clear on them. There's a site, Corby Road, Weldon. What can you tell me about that? Is that a commitment with planning permission?
I believe so, yes, it does have planning permission. Bear with me, I'm going to have to get another evidence document.
Sorry.
Apologies.
All right, don't worry.
Would it be okay, Mum, if I ask my colleague to step in place for these sites? Would that be okay with you?
I think it's only that one actually that I'm interested in. I think all the other sites are either allocations or ones that that are very small or I'm aware of. But yeah, I'm happy if that helps. Yes, I don't mind.
Yes, please. Just for this one site then. Thank you.
Miss Shave again. Well, welcome back. So yes, I was asking about Corby Road, Weldon.
Yes, so that's permission associated with it for 31 dwellings. It's set out in the 5-year housing land supply document, but following the permission for 31 dwellings, the developers actually submitted another application for an additional 6 dwellings to that site. So they've now applied for 37 dwellings at that site. That application is actually still pending at the moment. Right. And it's, I think, from my knowledge, the case office is still dealing in conversations with the developer. So it does have a detailed planning permission associated with 31 dwellings, but they're trying to obviously have additional dwellings at that site, so which is still pending a decision.
Right, no, that's fine. I mean, in terms of trajectory, it's looking at 21, 22. So I mean, I think that there's any particular issues in relation to that. So I think that's fine. I mean, other sites in your 5-year supply, again, they presumably they're all commitments that you are confident are going to come forward within the 5-year supply period.
That's right.
Right, and they are quite small sites actually in the main. Church Peace, Stanland, Glebe Farm. They are relatively small sites. Yeah, no, I don't think I need to ask any more on that. Thank you.
Just to may help you out. In Appendix 6G, it sets out additional details in relation to the Corby Road site. I'm not sure if that will help or not. Yeah,
that's helpful. Thank you. Yeah, no, that's good. Thank you very much. Thank you, Miss Shave. Now we've got Mr. Lucas here, has got your hand up. So do you wish to come in at this point, please, Mr. Lucas?
Yeah, just on Corby Road, Weldon. Corby Road, Weldon, there was a planning application submitted. It was refused by CBC, Corby Borough Council, for 31. It went to appeal. It was won on appeal. I hadn't been able to see the appeal details. And then a fresh application was submitted for 37 units. And it says here that a decision was expected by the end of 2019, but we've got no further information. Well, there are some site-specific issues not mentioned in your deliverability report. Now that could affect the housing numbers. We're in a situation where part of the site is zone 1, flood zone 1, right. Part is flood zone 2, and part is flood zone 3. And as I understand it, there is an objection from the Environment Agency, which hasn't been resolved. It is current, and by current I mean their last letter was 7th of November 2019 on this. following a letter from September 2019. So there's still an outstanding objection on this. And I suspect, ma'am, in terms of numbers, that's an issue in terms of numbers, because when she upped the numbers to 37 from 31, and I never saw the appeal, so I couldn't comment on whether flooding was an issue on that particular aspect. It's certainly an issue that isn't resolved. And so we've had an application that's been in since the 1st of June 2016, and that's still unresolved.
Right, but from the point you're making there, the appeal has been allowed, so therefore there is an extant permission for 31. So the issues that remain in terms of flood risk and the EA objection, that's in relation to the revised application for 37.
Yeah.
So in terms of the extant permission of 31, that is still potentially a developable, deliverable site because it has a permission.
If they've moved forward with the application, so to speak, if they've addressed, if they've
presumably they've discharged the conditions on the appeal decision, in which case they would be in a position to implement that for 31 rather than the 37.
Yeah. I'm sorry I sound like a bore on this, Ma'am, but all I'm suggesting is that if we have information, current information in the details, then everybody is aware of the problems of the site, or if there aren't any problems. And there is an outstanding issue here on flood because there's a lake at the southern end of the site, Ma'am, and that's an issue, and that isn't mentioned. And all I'm saying is, why not mention these things? It's clear, everybody knows where they stand in terms of 5-year housing land supply. I don't want to split hairs on 6 units, but I'm just saying there is an issue there that needs to be resolved.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Mr. Lucas. No problem. Mrs. Turner, do you want to respond to any of that?
Can I just very briefly provide an update? I understand that the permission for 31 dwellings has actually been implemented. So,
oh, right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Right. Thank you for that. That's helpful. Okay. I think that's probably all I need to ask on the actual allocations. And we are in a very unusual position with this local planning that we have a number of allocated sites and very little, if any, objection to them. That is probably a benefit of them being in the urban area and not raising issues such as use of countryside or green belt or whatever. So we are in as I said, in quite a fortunate and unusual position in terms of your allocations. Hence why this session is reasonably short compared to many other local planning examinations. So are there any other final comments from anybody before we draw this to a close?
Yeah, I'd just like to move on a couple of sites, Ma'am, that we've looked at. Brook Academy, Oakley Vale. Brook Academy, Vale, phase 8 and 9. Now, if you see it in your housing land availability report, Ma'am, it's due to bring forward a number of, I think the first year is 2021. All I'm asking is, where are we now in terms of submission of reserve matters on this site? Because there was an outline approved on the 7th of June 2018 for 530 dwellings. The owners are not developers, and so far as we're aware, the land has not been sold. And so all I'm asking is, how realistic is the site schedule for the 131 units coming forward from 2021-22, that's for 30-31, then 50 in 22-23, and 50 in 23-24. How realistic is that, bearing in mind the situation we find ourselves? There's no submission of reserve matters, and there's also, these aren't developers, these are it's owned by a farming consortium.
Right. Okay. Mrs. Turner, are you able to help with this, or do we need Miss Shave on this point?
Bear with me, I'll switch Miss Shave in.
Okay, that's fine, that's no problem.
Thank you, Ma'am.
Thank you. Right, so you're back in the hot seat, Miss Shave.
Hot seat.
To Oakley Vale phase 8 and 9, we are obviously in the process of updating our 5-year housing land supply, which I mentioned in my earlier matter. Unfortunately, we haven't got an update to give at this time, so the latest position we have available is set out in the publication draft, publication draft plan and 5-year housing land supply document November 19. The council is proactively working with the developer to take the steps to obviously to push this site forward, but unfortunately I don't have any other further details at this time to provide at this site.
Okay, can I confirm the planning permission situation on that? Is that correct, that it has an outline permission but reserve matters
Yes.
still awaited?
Yes, that's correct.
Outline consent, 7th of June 2018, Mum.
Thank you. Right, so it's been a little bit of delay then between the outline consent and reserve matters coming forward. And we can only speculate on the reasons for that. Okay, right, I'll take that point on board anyway. Right, okay, thank you, Mr. Lucas. Any other further comments you want to make, Mr. Lucas?
Well, if you want the application reference, I can give you that, Mum, if you want it.
No, I don't need that, thank you. No, the date for the outline permission is probably all I need.
Okay, that's one. And I just wanted to see where we are on this site. It's called Silent Pride at Little Stanion.
Again, from top of my knowledge, this is obviously we're only commencing the background work for 5-year housing and supply update at the moment. I am aware that the development management officers are in conversation again with the site owner and with JME, who are dealing with that site now. I don't have any specific details to give regarding that site, unfortunately, but this will definitely be considered in our next update, which will be fed into the next AMR submission and council's housing and supply update. So all the sites that obviously set out in the current supply will be addressed and will be updated and reviewed. And at this time, we don't have any further information to provide, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Right.
Mum, can I just carry on?
You can, yes, go on.
Thank you. There's the clarity as to which site is expected to deliver the housing and when. Parcel 6, as I understand it here, has consent for 15 dwellings, and that will move forward on 2021-22.
So which is parcel 6 you're referring to, Mr. Lucas?
Well, that's the approval.
Right, okay, right.
There's 2 parcels of land here, Ma'am, and only one of them has resolved the planning conditions.
Right, okay, I see. Right, thank you.
And so that'll give us 15. The question I'm asking is, there's another 80 units coming forward from this site. 2022, 23, 40, 2023, 24, another 40. That'll give us in total, I believe, 122 units from this site. So that's the first point. Where are we in terms of that second area of land, the 80 units? And there's also an issue, as I understand it, on the 106 agreement, the legal agreement here, whereby the applicants have gone back to you and asked for a reconsideration, indeed a variation for the legal agreement, the 106 agreement. So where are we in terms of this? Because I haven't seen that reported in your appendices at all. And there's an objection letter from Northamptonshire County Council on the 2nd of July 2020 on this matter. And so the financial viability assessment, all of that, it's quite important because 122 units are scheduled to come through from here in the 5-year housing land supply. And we still haven't got that information to hand. That's not in the public document anyway.
Yes, Ms. Shave, can you enlighten us on this one, please?
Firstly, with the 106 agreement, that is a matter that is currently going on in the background with our development management officers, our colleagues in development management and head of service. And that is expected to go back to the development management committee later this year. During this year, I haven't got any timeframes of that at the moment, but it will be going back to committee to confirm. It's obviously in conversations at the moment between the developers and ourselves at the council, but it will be going back to committee in due course to resolve that matter.
That's the first point. But obviously, in terms of the other 80 units, we need to know, or rather, the inspector needs to know, are they coming forward? Because we've got 15. I'm not arguing about the 15. That's fine. That's on the first parcel of land. It's on the second parcel of land at Silent Pride.
Right,
yes,
so the larger parcel. Yeah.
Yes.
So I was just going to come to that point, Mr. Lucas. Apologies. I was just about to come to that point now. So just to confirm, so yeah, the site referred to in the 5-year housing land supply statement, which is outline permission for the 99 to 135, as you've confirmed, yes, there's an application in for the 15 dwellings, which I believe from the top of my head is titled phase 6. Phase 5 is actually for the other part of that site. That application is expected in due course as well, and that's what the council development management officer is dealing with at the moment with the developer. They're just finalising that at the moment. Again, unfortunately, I don't have the timeframes for that. That's a matter that our development management colleagues are looking at the moment. But it is expected in due course. And we'll hopefully expect that to be set out in our next housing and supply statement.
Yeah, but excuse me for saying, I'm not trying to split hairs with you or be awkward. I really am not trying to be awkward. But if you're reading information in your housing land supply document and then you're looking at the reasons for delays or anything, you need to clarify the two parcels. It's not clear. It's only because I've actually delved into that, I've found that out. If you're a layperson, you couldn't see that at all. It would be misleading. And I'm not saying it is misleading deliberately. Obviously, I'm not saying that. But all I'm saying is it would be much easier to have that clearly set out, parcel 5 and parcel 6, what's the situation in those two parcels to give you your 122 units. Because clearly at the present time, there is an issue and there's an unresolved issue on 2 points. A, the application hasn't been submitted. And secondly, there is a 106 agreement in terms of the quite important aspects in terms of how much money is going to be spent on the various education, roads and all the rest of it. So
Right.
there's an issue there, Mum. Sorry.
Yes, I understand there's an issue, but I think that inevitably with any of this information on housing sites coming forward, there is always a time lag. And the trajectory has a base date of April 2019. Some of the information you're referring to there is much more recent and clearly hasn't been picked up in the evidence that's been submitted for the examination, which is understandable because things move on all the time. What I think might be helpful on this particular one is if the council could just provide me with a factual position statement of where that site currently lies, just for my information, and then that can be put on the website so it's clear to everybody. I think that will probably be the best way forward on this one rather than trying to pursue it any further now. Is that all right, Ms. Shave?
That's absolutely fine. I'm happy to set out the facts regarding this site.
Yes, if it's just a purely factual statement of position, that would be very helpful. Thank you for that. No problem.
Well, I'm just reading the information from the Appendix 6D, evidence of deliverability at Little Stannion. So I'm reading what is in there as evidence of deliverability. And all I'm suggesting is that that evidence of deliverability needs to be reviewed in some detail because it's, to me, it's misleading. And it's only because I looked at it, I realized that there were two phases here. What parcel 6 and parcel 5, and there needs to be clarity on that.
No, that's fine. I think that's helpful. If the council can produce a clear statement of the position on that site, then I think that will resolve that particular issue. But it isn't a site that's an allocation that's in the Part 2 plan. So in that sense, it hasn't got that particular remit. But I think it will be helpful that the council provide some further information just to update the position on that one. Okay, anything further, Mr. Lucas?
I just want to be absolutely certain on one final site, Mum, and that's Parkland Gateway. The site called Parkland Gateway.
Okay.
And that's
this is a site that we are going to look at when we look at the retail matter, because it is a site, the town centre site effectively. It's a mixed use site. We are going to look at it then. But as you're here now and we have the time, I'm quite happy to have a conversation about it and discussion here.
Well, exactly that. Now, obviously, I'm looking at evidence of deliverability and the information that is before us in terms of the local plan, its contribution of 64 dwellings. Well, the only question I'm asking, and I'm definitely not trying to be awkward, is just that over 2 years ago, we were looking at approve the developers' proposals and applications to be submitted, and that was over two years ago. All I'm saying is, where are we in terms of moving forward?
Right, okay. As I said, this is something I'm going to pick up on. Well, I think it's matter 9 tomorrow, okay. Where we look at the town centre allocations, the 3 in particular that are coming forward as mixed use sites. So it will be covered in a later session, but I will just allow the council. Miss Jave, are you able to help just briefly on that point now while Mr. Lucas is with us?
Obviously, it will be covered in detail.
Yes.
You could provide to overlap that information really. I'm aware there's an application right now, but that's kind of the only information I have. I haven't got any other information to hand at this time.
Okay, but I can assure you, Mr. Lucas, it's something that I will be addressing when we have our Matt and I discussion tomorrow.
No, thank you, Mark. The only reason I'm being awkward, Annie, is the fact that it's just part of the 5-year housing land supply, and I just wanted to just make sure we all understand that. Thank you.
No, that's fine. As I said, it will be addressed, so I can assure you of that.
Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Is there anything further from anybody? Any final points from the council? No. Okay, then that's lovely. Thank you very much, everybody. In that case, then I will bring this session to a close. We'll adjourn for lunch, and we are back again at 2 o'clock this afternoon to look at more detailed housing and custom build and specialist housing. But thank you, everybody, for your participation and assistance this morning.
Thank you, Mum.
Thank you, Mum. Thank you. Thank you.